The millionaire tested her by acting poor and paralyzed, but the wrong table waitress passed the test. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let us return to our main character. The rain fell hard against the windows of the small diner on the edge of town, washing the neon lights across the wet pavement like shifting ribbons of color. Inside, the warmth of the room clashed sharply with the cold night outside. It was late, the kind of quiet hour when only a handful of customers remained. But tonight, someone unusual had taken a seat in the far corner near the window. He looked like a man who had been through too many storms. His clothes were worn, his shoes soaked, and his hands slightly trembling as he settled into the seat of an old wheelchair. His posture hunched as though carrying a weight far heavier than rain. No one paid him much attention. To the other customers, he was just another man struggling through life. But this man was not who he appeared to be. His name was Lucas Hale, a billionaire known only to those who moved in the highest circles of influence. The world saw him as powerful, unreachable, protected by layers of assistance and wealth. Yet tonight he sat alone in a wheelchair, wearing thrift store clothing, disguising himself with precision. Every detail was intentional. For months, he had felt suffocated by people who smiled at him only for what he could offer. He needed to know whether kindness could still exist in its purest form, whether compassion could survive without recognition or reward. Tonight was his test. Inside the diner, the staff moved quickly to prepare for closing. One waitress hurried past Lucas without glancing his way, focused entirely on her own tasks. Another exchanged an irritated sigh when she noticed the wheelchair, clearly worried that serving him would delay her shift ending. But fate had different plans. A young waitress with short black hair and bright, observant eyes stepped out from the kitchen, holding a stack of menus. Her name was Ruby Flores, though Lucas did not know that yet. She looked around the room, expecting to serve table 5, but a coworker waved her vaguely toward the corner. "Wrong table, but take it anyway," the coworker said, before disappearing through the swinging door. So Ruby walked toward Lucas, unaware that she had just stepped into the beginning of a test she never asked for but was destined to pass. When she reached the table, her expression did not shift into judgment like the others. Instead, she offered a small, genuine smile that softened the tension in the air. "Good evening," Ruby said gently. "It looks like the rain caught you. Can I bring you something warm?" Lucas blinked, startled by the kindness in her tone. His script for the night had prepared him for impatience, irritation, dismissal. But not this. I do not have much," he murmured, staying fully in character. Ruby shook her head. "That is all right. You can sit here as long as you need. I will bring you some hot tea, no charge." Lucas felt something shift in his chest, an unfamiliar tightness that had nothing to do with the disguise. Her kindness was not loud. It was not showy. It was effortless, woven into her voice like she had spent years learning how to offer it to others. As she walked away toward the kitchen, Lucas watched her carefully. This was not a woman acting out of pity or obligation. This was someone who cared simply because it was right. He had come here to test the world. Instead, the world had sent him Ruby. And she had just passed the first part of a test she did not even know existed. If you would like part 2, stay tuned. The steam from the hot tea drifted upward in slow curls as Ruby set the mug gently in front of Lucas. The warmth of it seemed to melt a thin layer of the cold air surrounding him. Lucas kept his eyes lowered, staying in character, but he watched her through the corner of his vision. There was no hesitation in her movements, no sign of discomfort at the way he struggled to lift the cup with unsteady hands. Instead, she shifted the mug closer to him, making it easier for him to grasp. "If you need help, just let me know," Ruby said softly. Her voice carried no pity. Only respect. Lucas forced his fingers to tremble as he lifted the cup. The act was part of his disguise, a detail he had practiced many times before staring into mirrors in his penthouse far above the city. But tonight, for the first time, he felt the shame of pretending to be weaker than he was, especially in front of someone who clearly had so little yet gave so much. Ruby stepped back to give him space, then checked on a nearby table before turning toward the counter. Her apron tie trailed slightly behind her as she walked with a quiet determination. Lucas observed her carefully, noting the tired set of her shoulders and the faint smudges under her eyes. She was young, but she carried exhaustion like someone who had been fighting through life, one bill, one shift, one sleepless night at a time. After a few minutes, Ruby returned to him with a plate of warm toast. "This is from the kitchen," she said. "No charge. The cook makes extra sometimes." Lucas knew that was a lie. The cook had not made extra. The cook had yelled earlier about missing ingredients. Ruby was covering the cost herself, pretending it was nothing. He felt a twist of guilt in his chest. "Thank you," he whispered. She smiled again, the kind of smile that looked like it belonged to a person who chose kindness consciously, not accidentally. A smile earned through struggle, not privilege. As she turned away again, Lucas watched the interactions around her. A group of rude teenagers snapped their fingers impatiently. A businessman demanded his check with irritation. A couple complained about the rain and the service. Ruby moved through all of it with a patience that seemed almost impossible. Not once did she raise her voice. Not once did she lose her composure. He had not expected this. He had expected a waitress who would tolerate him but not care. Someone who might ignore him, or worse, treat him as a burden. But Ruby spoke to him with the same tone she used for everyone else. She looked him in the eyes, not at the wheelchair. She respected him as a human being, not as a test subject. Lucas felt the notebook pressed against the inside of his coat. In it were observations from previous weeks, from other diners, other people, other attempts to understand what true kindness meant. None of those entries had ever felt significant. But tonight, he already knew the line he would write when he returned home. "She treated me like my life mattered." A sudden clang from the kitchen made Ruby flinch. Her coworker called out, annoyed, asking why she had taken the wrong table. Ruby apologized quietly, even though she had been sent there. Lucas noticed her cheeks warm with embarrassment, but she remained composed. When she came back to refill his tea, Lucas spoke. "You do not have to stay long," he said. "I do not want to cause trouble for you." Ruby shook her head. "You are not causing trouble. You are a customer. And a person. That is enough." Lucas looked down, swallowing a guilt he had not expected to feel. She had passed every quiet test he had set before her without even knowing she was being watched. But Ruby was not finished surprising him. Before walking away, she set a folded $5 bill on the table. "Your check was a little short," she said gently. "Do not worry. You can pay me back another time. Or not at all." Lucas stared at the bill, stunned. In his world, $5 meant nothing. In her world, it meant a sacrifice. The test he had planned so carefully had suddenly turned into something far greater than he expected. If you would like part 3, stay tuned. The rain eased into a gentle drizzle the next evening, leaving the sidewalks glistening beneath the streetlights. Lucas returned to the diner once more, not because the experiment required it, but because something inside him felt pulled back to the small warmth Ruby carried in her presence. He had spent the afternoon reviewing business proposals and high-stakes contracts, yet every empty signature line reminded him of the sincerity he had felt the night before. Wealth could solve many things, but it could not create the kind of kindness Ruby offered so freely. When he entered the diner, Ruby was at the counter restocking cups. She looked up at the sound of the bell, her eyes brightening slightly. "You are back," she said, with a soft smile that carried no judgment, only recognition. Lucas nodded and maneuvered the wheelchair toward the booth she had wiped earlier. The wheels squeaked faintly, a detail he had added intentionally to make the disguise more convincing. But Ruby did not react to the sound. Instead, she hurried to adjust the chair and placed a folded napkin on the table the same way she had done the night before. "Let me get your tea," she said, as though it were already part of her routine. As she walked away, Lucas studied the small diner more closely. He noticed the chipped paint near the baseboards, the flickering bulb above the entrance, and the handwritten specials taped to the refrigerator. It was a place built not on luxury but on effort. The kind of effort Ruby poured into every shift without complaint. When she returned, she placed the tea gently before him. "2 sugar packets, right?" Lucas blinked, touched by the gesture. "You remembered?" Ruby shrugged as if it were nothing. "I try to pay attention." That simple sentence landed heavier than she knew. Lucas lifted the cup with deliberate difficulty as required by his role, and she subtly angled the saucer closer to him. Her actions were thoughtful without being intrusive, kind without being performative. In his world, kindness often came purchased or rehearsed. In hers, it came naturally. As customers filtered in, Ruby moved quickly between tables. A man asked for extra napkins. A family requested a larger booth. A college student needed the Wi-Fi password. Ruby handled each need with patient efficiency. Even when the manager raised his voice at her for a mistake another server made, she lowered her gaze and apologized without shifting blame. Lucas felt something rise in his chest, a mix of anger and admiration. She deserved far more than this. When she approached him again, a faint crease lingered between her brows. "Sorry for the wait. It has been a busy hour." "You do not need to apologize," Lucas said gently. "You have been very attentive." She exhaled softly as if his reassurance eased something inside her. "Thank you. Some days are harder than others." Lucas hesitated. "Do you ever take a break?" Ruby laughed quietly. "Breaks are for people with shorter shifts. I work too today." He studied her, noticing the tired curve of her shoulders. "That sounds exhausting." "It is," she admitted, "but I need the hours. My mother is not well, and medication is expensive. So, I do what I can." The honesty in her tone struck him deeper than he anticipated. She spoke about hardship without bitterness, only resolve. It was the kind of strength that was rare even among the powerful people he knew. Ruby continued, unaware of the impact her words had. "People think kindness is easy, but it is a choice. A daily one, especially on the days when everything feels heavy." Lucas swallowed, unable to find words. She had answered the very question his test was meant to uncover: was kindness still real in a world full of self-interest? Ruby had just proven that it was. Before leaving, she placed a small, wrapped cookie on his table. "I baked these earlier. I thought you might like one." Lucas stared at it, stunned by the gesture. "Why me?" "Because everyone deserves something warm," she said. As she walked away, Lucas realized the truth he had not expected to find so soon. Ruby had passed every test he set without even knowing she was being tested. If you would like part 4, stay tuned. Morning came with a pale gray sky, the kind that made the city feel slower and softer. Lucas arrived at the diner earlier than usual, drawn by something he still refused to name out loud. The bell above the door chimed quietly as he entered, and Ruby looked up from the coffee station. Her smile was small but genuine, carrying the same warm steadiness she had shown him since the beginning. "You are here early today," she said. "So are you," Lucas replied. Ruby laughed lightly. "Opening shift. Someone has to start the coffee before the rush." She moved past him with a pot in hand, refilling cups and greeting the regular customers. Lucas watched her work, realizing she had already memorized the morning routine of nearly everyone who walked through the door. She knew who needed decaf without asking, who preferred extra cream, and who wanted silence until they fully woke up. She treated each person with the same attentiveness she had shown him, even if they barely noticed her effort. As she approached his booth, she set down a fresh cup of tea. "I thought you might want this before it gets busy." "You remembered again," Lucas said quietly. "I try to remember the little things," she answered. "They matter." Those words lingered in the air between them. To Ruby, remembering was an act of care. To Lucas, it felt like a mirror held up to everything he had forgotten about real human connection. The diner soon filled with noise. A distressed mother tried to calm her crying toddler. A group of office workers hurried through breakfast. A delivery driver complained loudly about the rain. Ruby moved through all of it with unwavering patience. She crouched down to hand the toddler a napkin folded into a small animal, and the child stopped crying almost instantly. Lucas watched the moment carefully. Ruby did not do it for praise. She did it because she understood that small comforts could shift a person's entire day. When she returned to Lucas, her cheeks were flushed from rushing around. "Are you doing all right?" she asked. "I am," Lucas replied. "But you look like you are carrying more than a shift today." Ruby hesitated, then exhaled slowly. "I did not sleep much last night. My mother had a bad evening, so I stayed with her." Lucas felt the familiar ache of guilt twist in his chest again. He was sitting in a wheelchair, pretending to be someone he was not, while she fought real battles every single day. Ruby added quietly, "But it is all right. We get by. There are harder days and easier days. You always seem to handle them with grace, Lucas said. Ruby smiled, but it did not fully reach her eyes. I try. A sudden crash from the kitchen startled them both. Ruby glanced toward the swinging door as a coworker shouted something careless. She shook her head and hurried over, offering to help clean up the mess, even though she had not caused it. Lucas saw the way she absorbed responsibility simply to keep peace, the way she carried burdens that were not hers to bear. When she returned, she brushed flour from her apron and gave a soft laugh. It is a circus back there. Lucas looked at her with quiet admiration. You deserve a better stage. Ruby blinked, surprised by the kindness in his voice. For a moment, her guard lowered and he could see the exhaustion, the courage, and the hope she tried to keep hidden beneath it all. You are very thoughtful, she said gently. For someone who has so much to carry. Lucas lowered his gaze. If she only knew how little he carried compared to what she faced every day. As she stepped away to greet a new customer, Lucas rested his hands on the arms of the wheelchair and felt the lie of it more heavily than ever before. Ruby was teaching him something his wealth never had. Kindness was not measured by ability or status. Kindness was measured by intention. And Ruby had passed every silent test he had placed before her. If you would like part 5, stay tuned. The late afternoon crowd drifted into the diner with the sound of wet shoes and impatient voices. A storm was forming outside the wind, pushing against the windows hard enough to make them tremble. Inside, Ruby moved with practiced grace even as the atmosphere grew tense. Lucas could sense the shift instantly. The diners were louder, more demanding, and Ruby's coworkers were already showing signs of irritation. Lucas watched closely, knowing that stress often revealed true character. But Ruby, even under strain, remained steady. A group of teenagers entered, laughing loudly and shoving each other as they slid into a booth. Their energy collided with the quiet rhythm Ruby had been holding on to. She approached with her notepad, offering her usual warm greeting. The boys barely looked at her, ordering rudely and tossing a crumpled napkin onto the floor. Ruby bent down to pick it up without complaint. Lucas tightened his grip on the wheelchair armrest. He had seen rude customers before, but it bothered him more now that he understood how much Ruby carried on her shoulders. The test had never included moments like this, but suddenly everything in him wanted to shield her from the unfairness she faced every day. As Ruby served their drinks, one of the boys tapped the edge of her tray, causing a glass to tip. Water splashed across her apron and dripped onto the floor. "Oh, come on," the boy laughed. "Do you not know how to hold it?" Ruby froze for a moment. Her lips pressed together, her shoulders stiffened, but she did not retaliate. She simply nodded, wiped the table, and said, "I will bring a new one." Lucas felt anger rising in his chest. Ruby deserved better than this treatment. But he remained in character, silent, observing until something else shifted in the room. The diner manager stormed out from the back, scowling. "Ruby, what is going on? I heard a spill." Ruby straightened her apron. It was an accident. The manager looked past her at the teenagers, who shrugged with exaggerated innocence. Then his eyes landed on Ruby again, sharp and unfair. "You need to be more careful. We cannot keep losing supplies because of your mistakes." Lucas watched a flicker of hurt cross Ruby's face. Not anger. Not frustration. Hurt. Because she was being blamed for something she had taken the blame for many times before. She nodded quietly and returned to the counter, wiping her damp hands on her apron. When she approached Lucas's booth, she forced a small smile. "Sorry about the noise. Some days are like this." "You did nothing wrong," Lucas said. His voice was low but steady, more certain than he intended. "They did." Ruby shook her head gently. "It is all right. Some people just need space to grow." But Lucas could see the exhaustion behind her eyes, the kind that did not come from spilled drinks or rude customers, but from a lifetime of being the one who absorbed everyone else's emotions. Before she could turn away, 2 new customers entered the diner. They were dressed sharply out of place among the casual crowd. One of them scanned the room, and his gaze lingered on Lucas with narrowed eyes, recognition flickering behind them. Lucas felt a jolt of panic. He knew that man. They had met at a charity gala months earlier. The man whispered to his companion, "Is that Lucas Hale?" Ruby, noticing Lucas tense, suddenly stepped closer. "Are you all right?" Lucas forced himself to slouch deeper into the wheelchair, averting his gaze. I just need a moment. Ruby looked between him and the newcomers, then made a decision without hesitation. She positioned herself subtly in front of him, blocking their line of sight as she poured a fresh cup of coffee. Take your time, she whispered. You are safe here. Her quiet assurance felt like a shield he had never expected to need. Yet in that same moment, Lucas realized something deeper. The test he designed to judge the kindness of others was beginning to judge him instead, and he was not sure he would pass. If you would like part 6, stay tuned. The two sharply dressed men lingered by the entrance, their voices low but tense. Lucas kept his eyes down as Ruby moved calmly between tables, subtly creating a barrier of movement that shielded him from their view. She had no idea who Lucas truly was, yet she protected him instinctively, as if kindness had become her natural response to anyone who seemed vulnerable. But Lucas knew this moment could unravel his entire test. The men walked toward the counter, scanning the diner. Ruby noticed the direction of their gaze and quickly stepped into their line of sight. Can I help you both with something? She asked, her tone polite but firm. Yes, one of them replied. We are looking for someone. Ruby kept her expression neutral. This is a diner. People come and go. The men exchanged glances, then one asked, has anyone unusual come in tonight? Someone alone, someone who seems out of place. Ruby folded her hands calmly. Everyone here is just trying to get a meal and stay out of the rain. It was not a lie. It was not the truth either. It was Ruby choosing compassion again, choosing to protect someone she believed needed it. The men eventually took a booth near the window, still murmuring to each other. Lucas forced himself to breathe evenly as Ruby approached his table. Are they bothering you? She whispered. No, Lucas replied quietly. You do not need to worry. Ruby looked at him for a moment, her expression softening. I just do not like when people make others feel unsafe. Her sincerity landed like a weight in Lucas's chest. Ruby acted with courage, not because she knew who he was, but because she believed everyone deserved dignity. And yet he was deceiving her every time she spoke to him. Before he could respond, the dinner rush intensified. The diner filled with voices, footsteps, and the clatter of plates. Ruby was pulled in every direction, delivering orders, cleaning spills, and apologizing for delays that were not her fault. Her coworker disappeared into the kitchen more often than not, leaving her to handle the busiest shift alone. Lucas watched the strain build. Her movements grew faster, her breaths shorter. Step by step, she pushed through the storm of demands with the same resilience she had shown since the day he met her. But then something happened that shifted everything. One of the sharply dressed men stood abruptly and approached Ruby at the counter. Has that man left? He asked, gesturing vaguely toward the area where Lucas sat earlier. Ruby glanced at Lucas, then returned her gaze to the man. No. And I do not think he wants company. We need to speak with him, the man insisted. Ruby shook her head. He asked to be left alone. Please respect that. The man exhaled impatiently and leaned closer. You do not understand. He is Sir. Ruby cut in, surprising both Lucas and the man. Whatever he is, it does not change the fact that he deserves peace. So unless he invites you to speak, you will have to wait. Her steady voice silenced the room around them. Even the manager looked up from the register. The man narrowed his eyes but eventually stepped back, frustrated. Ruby returned to her tasks with quiet resolve, unaware of how deeply her courage affected Lucas. No one had ever stood up for him while believing he had nothing to offer. No one. As she passed his table, Lucas whispered, "Thank you." Ruby smiled faintly. Everyone deserves someone on their side. Those simple words struck him like a truth he had avoided for years. He had lived in a world where alliances were strategic relationships, conditional, and kindness bought with favors. Yet here was Ruby standing up for a man she thought was poor and paralyzed simply because it was right. Lucas felt the weight of his disguise tightening around him. The test he had designed now felt cruel. Ruby was giving him everything she had: patience, kindness, empathy, while he gave her nothing but a lie. For the first time, he wondered not whether Ruby would pass his test, but whether he deserved her kindness at all. If you would like part 7, stay tuned. The diner quieted as the evening rush faded, leaving behind the soft hum of appliances and the faint clatter of dishes being stacked in the back. Ruby wiped down the counter with slow, tired motions. The long shift had drained her, but she kept the same gentle composure she always carried. Lucas remained near the window, watching her with a deepening heaviness in his chest. Her kindness had become something far more powerful than anything his experiment had prepared him for. When Ruby approached with a refill of tea, her hands trembled slightly from exhaustion. "You should sit for a moment," Lucas said quietly. She smiled, brushing off her fatigue. "If I sit, I may not stand up again, so I keep moving." He admired her resilience, but it pained him to watch. She deserved rest. She deserved support. She deserved honesty. Yet he was still the one person in the room withholding the truth she had earned from him. Before either of them could speak further, the diner manager called across the room. "Ruby, can you take out the trash? The others are closing out registers." Ruby nodded and headed toward the back door. Lucas watched her struggle to lift the heavy bag, her arms shaking as she dragged it outside. Without thinking, he rose slightly from his wheelchair to help, but the mask of his test stopped him halfway. He sat back down quickly, gripping the wheels until his hands calmed. He hated himself for hesitating. Ruby returned with cold air clinging to her skin, her breath visible in the doorway. She rubbed her hands together for warmth before returning to Lucas's table. "Sorry for the wait," she said softly. "You should not have to do all of that alone," Lucas replied. Ruby shrugged. "Someone has to." Her humility made his guilt feel sharper. The sharply dressed men from earlier stood again, preparing to leave. One lingered, glancing toward Lucas with suspicion. Lucas lowered his head, but Ruby noticed immediately. She walked to the entrance, intercepting them. "Thank you for coming," she said firmly. "Have a good evening." It was a polite dismissal, but also a clear message. She was protecting Lucas again without knowing why he needed protection in the first place. When she returned to the booth, she hesitated, as if debating whether to speak the thought resting on her lips. "Lucas," she said, lowering her voice, "I do not know what is going on, but I want you to know that you do not have to face anything alone." Her sincerity broke something inside him. "You do not even know me," he whispered. Ruby shook her head. "I know enough. I know how you speak to people. I know how gently you hold your cup even when your hands shake. I know how you thank me every time, even when you have nothing to offer. People show who they are in small moments." Lucas looked away, unable to meet her eyes. "And what have I shown you that you are trying?" Ruby said simply. "And sometimes trying is the bravest thing a person can do." Her words were too pure for the lie he carried. As the evening deepened, the diner emptied until only Ruby and Lucas remained. She locked the front door and dimmed the lights, then approached his table with quiet finality. "It is time to close," she said softly, "but you can take a moment before you leave." Lucas nodded, rolling himself toward the door. But Ruby caught the edge of the wheelchair gently. "Lucas," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "If you ever need help, you can ask me." He stared at her hand on the wheel, feeling the sting of his own deception burn deeper than ever. Ruby offered kindness without condition, and he answered with disguise. As she stepped back, Lucas felt the full weight of his test shift onto him. He had come here to measure her heart. Now, he was terrified she would discover the truth before he found the courage to speak it. If you would like part 8, stay tuned. The next morning arrived with a pale, heavy silence, as if the sky itself was unsure whether to brighten or remain gray. Lucas did not sleep. He had spent most of the night wrestling with the weight of his deception, replaying every moment Ruby had shown him kindness without knowing the truth behind his disguise. Her words, "You do not have to face anything alone," echoed in his mind long after he left the diner. He returned to the diner later than usual, hoping to avoid the sharper of the two men who had nearly exposed him. When he entered, Ruby was behind the counter, organizing receipts, her hair pulled into a loose knot and her eyes carrying faint shadows from another long shift. When she noticed him, her expression softened into something warm and familiar. "You made it," Ruby said gently. "I was not sure if I would see you today." Lucas hesitated before rolling forward. "I needed time to think." Ruby nodded as though she understood. "Everyone does." She brought him his tea with the 2 sugar packets placed neatly beside the cup, the small detail that had now become a symbol of their growing connection. But as he lifted the cup with his practiced trembling hands, something unexpected happened. His fingers steadied. Ruby froze. Her eyes widened slightly as she watched the movement confusion flickering across her expression. Lucas felt a surge of panic and quickly forced his hand to tremble again, but it was too late. Ruby had already seen the truth for a split second, and she had always been someone who paid attention to the smallest details. "Lucas," she said softly, her voice cautious. "Your hand? A moment ago it did not shake." Lucas's pulse quickened. "It happens sometimes," he replied, hoping the uncertainty in his voice would mask the lie. Ruby did not look convinced. She folded her arms lightly, worry clouding her gaze. "Are you sure you are all right? You do not have to pretend with me." Her sincerity struck harder than any accusation could have. She thought he was hiding pain, not deceiving her entirely. She thought he was trying to appear strong. The guilt tightened around his ribs. Before he could find a response, a loud crash echoed from the back of the diner. Ruby jumped slightly, then hurried toward the noise. Lucas watched as she found a stack of plates shattered on the floor, her coworker already blaming her for not checking the shelf earlier. Ruby apologized with quiet dignity, even though she had not been near the kitchen when it happened. Lucas felt an urge to rise from his wheelchair and defend her, to step out of the false identity he had built and become the man he truly was. But he remained seated, trapped by the test that now felt like a chain. Ruby returned to the counter moments later, dusting off her apron. When she walked past Lucas, she paused. "Can I ask you something?" she said softly. Lucas met her gaze. "Of course. Do you trust me?" The question pierced deeper than she intended. She asked it as someone trying to understand him, not as someone suspicious. She asked it because she genuinely cared whether he felt safe with her. Lucas swallowed. "I do." Ruby nodded slowly, her eyes searching his expression. "Then, please tell me if something is wrong. You do not have to carry everything alone. If you are hurting, you can say it." Her kindness was suffocating in the best and worst ways. She believed the lie was a burden of pain, not deception, not strategy, not manipulation. Pain. Lucas looked down, unable to hold her gaze. "Ruby. But before he could speak, the diner door opened with a sharp chime. The two sharply dressed men entered again, scanning the room with purpose. Ruby instinctively stepped between them and Lucas, her shoulders tightening. "You both need to leave him alone," she said firmly. The men moved closer. Lucas felt his heart hammering. Ruby did not know she was standing between two worlds, his false one and his real one, and either could shatter her trust. The moment sharpened with tension. Ruby glanced at Lucas. "I will protect you. Just stay here." And that was the moment the test broke. Because she was protecting a man who was not even real. If you would like part 9, stay tuned. The tension inside the diner thickened until even the hum of the overhead lights felt sharper. Ruby stood her ground, shielding Lucas with nothing but her resolve and the belief that he was a vulnerable man, being hunted for reasons he was too afraid to explain. Her hands shook, but her voice remained steady. "You both need to step back," Ruby said firmly. "He does not want to talk to you." One of the men exhaled, frustrated. "Miss, you do not understand. We are not here to harm him." Ruby crossed her arms. "Then stop cornering him." The second man glanced past her, locking eyes with Lucas. "Sir, you cannot keep doing this. People are worried." Lucas felt the world tilt. He had reached the breaking point of his deception. The lie that once shielded him now threatened to crush the very person who had given him the first genuine kindness he had seen in years. Ruby looked at Lucas again, her face full of questions. "Why are they talking to you like that? Who are they really?" Her innocence in the moment shattered the last of his excuses. Lucas lowered his hands from the wheelchair wheels. The room seemed to hold its breath as he slowly, deliberately rose to his feet. Ruby gasped, stumbling backward. Shock washed over her face, followed by something deeper: betrayal. The two men stepped aside as if relieved. "Thank you," one murmured. "This has gone too far." But Ruby only stared at Lucas, heartbroken. "You can walk," she whispered. "All this time, you could walk." Lucas felt something inside him crumble. "Ruby, please let me explain." She shook her head, tears gathering in her eyes. "Explain what? That you lied? That you pretended to struggle? That you let me believe you needed help?" "I did need help," Lucas said, voice trembling. "Not the kind you think. I needed to believe that genuine kindness still existed. I needed to know if someone would care for me without knowing my name." The manager and customers watched silently as Ruby stepped back, clutching her apron with trembling fingers. "You tested me," she said. "Every moment, every conversation, every time I tried to help you. It was part of a game." "It was never a game," Lucas insisted. "It was a mistake. A desperate attempt to understand the world. And you? Ruby, you were the only one who showed me something real." "That does not make it right," she replied softly. "You took my kindness and made it part of a lie." Lucas nodded slowly. "You are right. And I am sorry for every moment that hurt you." He reached into his coat and placed 3 items on the table between them. The torn notebook filled with his observations, the $5 bill she had offered him without hesitation, and the small wrapped cookie she had given him the night she first made him feel seen. "These are the reasons I failed my own test," he said. "Because you showed me more humanity than I deserved." Ruby stared at the objects, her expression fragile and conflicted. A long silence stretched between them before she whispered, "Why tell me the truth now?" "Because you stood in front of me," Lucas answered. "You defended someone you thought had nothing. You protected a lie because you believed it belonged to a person worth protecting. I could not let you carry that burden any longer." Ruby closed her eyes as a tear slipped down her cheek. Lucas stepped closer but did not touch her. "I cannot ask you to forgive me," he said gently. "But I want to spend however long it takes proving to you that the man you protected last night is still me. Even without the disguise." Ruby opened her eyes, meeting his with a mixture of pain and faint hope. "I need time," she said quietly. Lucas nodded. "Then I will wait." They did not embrace. They did not promise anything. But something soft passed between them. A recognition that the truth, no matter how painful, was the first honest step they had taken together. As Lucas turned toward the door, Ruby looked at the 3 small items on the table. The $5 bill, the cookie, the notebook. Proof that kindness had changed him, even if the healing would take time. And in the quiet of the diner, Ruby whispered to herself, maybe he was not testing kindness. Maybe he was trying to find it. Thank you for listening. If you would like more stories like this, stay tuned.